And now we would like to welcome Dr. Rob Rhykerd. He's a professor of agronomy and soil science in the Department of Agriculture at Illinois State University. He earned his bachelor's and master's degrees from Purdue and a PhD from Texas A&M. He joined the faculty at Illinois State University in 2001 and served as the department chair from 2007 to 2019. He has authored over 40 journal articles and secured over $2 million in external funding to support his research activities. He served 2 terms as editor for the Natural Sciences Education Journal and has received national teaching awards from the American Society of Agronomy and the Soil Science Society of America. He is a fellow of the American Society of Agronomy and the Indiana Academy of Science and served as the president of the non-land-grant colleges of Agriculture and Renewable Resources Universities. There we go. I'll turn it over to Dr. Rhykerd.
Thanks so much, Julie. It's really a privilege to be here with you this morning. And Giovanni, that was a wonderful presentation, and I think hopefully this presentation will complement a lot of what you said. So there were a lot of sidebar conversations at our table, so I hope we can catch up with you later today. I want to thank NREC for sponsoring the project that I'm going to talk about today. We've been looking at the impact of pennycress and then other cover crops on selected ecosystem services. We've been looking at some yield data too. I do want to give a shout out to all the colleague co-authors on here, John Sedbrook, who's done a lot of the genetic legwork with pennycress. Wynn Phippen over at Western and Tad Wesley have been wonderful collaborators. Bill Perry's with us today. Glad to have him with us. Nicholas Heller and Elsie Yanks helped with some anaerobic digestion work that we'll allude to and then encourage you to go see one of our grad students today. And then we've had, like everybody else, just a lot of great grad students, several of them here today, and I'm going to give a shout out. They brought a lot of their posters that will expand what I'm going to talk about today. So with that, let's jump right in. And just a quick overview. The first 2 speakers did a really nice job of just reminding us of the benefits of cover crops, some of the ecosystem services, if you will, that we can get from those. So they can reduce nitrogen and phosphorus entering the Illinois waterways. They can, let's see, which slide have I got? Yeah, there we go. Reduce nutrient loss, improve fertility in our soils, suppress weeds and diseases, and sequester carbon and all these types of things. So we're going to look at some of those variables as we move through the presentation today. Got a picture here with a couple of our grad students. This is our pea clover radish oat plot out at the ISU farm. So, tying this back in with the Illinois nutrient loss reduction strategy, and again, just a reminder there, it's 2025, right? So I saw Trevor Sample out here somewhere. So this is a big year for us. We're supposed to be, coming up with an update on how we're doing with runoff. So our goal was by this year to have reduced nitrates by 15%, phosphorus by 25%, and then by 2035, bring that down to a 45% reduction. And so how are we doing? And I've got a horrible picture here. This is actually just down the street from my house. And I love to show this in my ag classes and ask them, what's wrong with this picture? And after about 30 seconds, someone will say, well, there's corn growing in the ditch. And how do you get corn growing in your ditch, right? Well, obviously, we had a pretty serious erosion event. So this might have been a field that could have benefited from some cover crops, try to get some protection, get some organic matter on the surface, maybe some conservation practices. So just a reminder, we do need to study these things. So just a reminder about our Illinois nutrient loss reduction strategy. So if we look at the figure here, we got the baseline years, right? And this is the nitrogen and phosphorus losses that were measured over a several-year period. And then here's our goals. We're trying to bring nitrogen down by 15%, so that's this line here, and phosphorus by 25%. And the last report we had in 2023, the numbers had actually gone up a little bit, right? So nitrates up and total phosphorus is up, but water yield was also up too. So that's something I think we'll be all interested in looking and see what the report this year is. When we ask where is the nitrogen and phosphorus coming from, well, these figures, or these 2 images really kind of tell it all, don't they? So that the darker the red, the more nitrogen and phosphorus that's leaving these parts of the state. And if you look in the Midwest here in our Corn Belt, it's just kind of solid red in here. You almost can't see the pointer in there. And the story's the same for both of them. You can't even see the border of Illinois. So again, looking for ways, how do we keep those nutrients in our field and available for our summer cash crop, right? And there's a lot of economic value to that if we can do so. So winter cover crops can help, but as we've been hearing, there are some issues, and we need to, as researchers, continue to take a look at these. So this is a cultural shift, right? And so, adopting a new strategy, we've been pretty comfortable with our corn and soybean rotations. We've heard about the termination challenges, concerns of yield drag on our summer crop, summer cash crop, and then uncertain economic returns. And I've got a picture here. We planted corn and cereal rye, and we let ours grow up a little bit taller, Giovanni, than you did. This was, I think this was June 6th. I think we terminated mid-May. And I wouldn't recommend this to anybody. It was kind of cool as a researcher to take a look at this. But there you go, some corn coming up in cereal rye. So I'm going to talk today a lot about pennycress. So pennycress is, maybe you've heard a little bit about it. It's a novel oilseed crop. A good other crop to think of is like canola, and how canola evolved from rapeseed and has some really desirable oilseed properties that can be used to either make fuels or as a livestock feed, or the seeds can be used for livestock feed. And so we had a publication recently looking at some of the pros of really pennycress, and we're going to call it CoverCress in the gene-edited form, but it shows some real potential to be used for a feedstock to make fuels, and it also can be fed to livestock. So we hear a different aspect on the fuel production from Tuba today. She's got a poster on and using it for anaerobic digestion, and then Marley that's with us today is she's going to talk some about feeding it to chickens. So again, let's just talk a little bit about pennycress. So historically, this is a weed, right? Stinkweed, and the seed has about 25% oil and protein content, which can be pretty easily converted into fuels. But what I'd like you to think about is how this could be a winter cash crop. So instead of just growing something for the ecosystem services, maybe this could generate a little income, and so we're going to take a little closer look at pennycress for that. Some interesting things to note about pennycress. There's been a lot of developing efforts through pennycress and many others, including John Sedbrook on our campus. But one thing I do want to point out, CoverCress was a startup company, but they have been purchased by Bayer. I think some of us have heard of Bayer. But then also Bunge, which is a seed crushing company, and Chevron, which produces fuels. So you can start to connect the dots, right? Winter cash crop, if we can produce an oilseed crop that Bunge can crush and Chevron can make something out of it, maybe we've got a winter cover crop here that could have some economic viability for us. So let's kind of walk through what's happened to domesticate pennycress. I'm just going to hit some of the highlights of things that's happened to it. So again, as we look at the picture, I guess that's on your left, pennycress, and I'll probably refer to it by several different names. So, in our research meetings, it's just pennycress, right? Or sometimes wild pennycress or field pennycress or black-seeded pennycress. And then as we've gone through traditional breeding efforts and used some CRISPR-Cas9 technology, the seed coats changed from a black color to a golden color, and so that's where the golden pennycress terms comes from, or CoverCress, which is the name of the company and also the name of the crop they're releasing, which can be a little confusing. So you've got CoverCress, the company is now releasing CoverCress, which is, again, the edited and improved variety, if you will, of pennycress. So what were the traits that were addressed? There were a lot of them. I'm not going to go through all these, but things that you'd think of. We need to make sure the yield's there, improving oil content, improving protein content. There's seed fiber issues. There were some undesirable compounds that made it undesirable to feed to livestock. So looking at a lot of these types of properties. And just highlighting a few of these. So here, again, this is kind of a neat picture because it shows you the black-seeded pennycress, so that's the wild or field pennycress. It's got that black color to it. When you remove the fiber, then that gives it, or some of the fiber, that gives it this golden color. The oil concentration through some breeding improvements, gone from about 25% up to 30, 35, maybe a little higher than that. Agronomically, they've been able to get yields up to where they think it's in a range that could be profitable for farmers. And then finally, once you get the oil out, you've got the meal left over, that can be fed to livestock. And just a shout out to Marley that's with us today. She's got a poster here where she's going to talk about her research where she's been feeding this to chickens. And we actually ate some of those chickens last fall. Maybe you can get her to talk about that. So again, just some pictures of the breeding improvements. So, pennycress is a weed, and one of weed strategies is not to have all the seeds come up in one year, right? And so if we look at the wild type pennycress there on the left of your picture, emergence is kind of spotty here, but if we look at the gene-edited pennycress, we're getting 95+% emergence. So that was one of the really important breakthroughs, is to improve emergence of the crop. And then also preventing this from coming back year after year. So if you get the seed in the seed bank, the wild pennycress will just keep coming back. But with golden pennycress, if you look at this, and in particular, these two figures here, so on the left here, this is our field pennycress, this is the weed. This is a year after they planted the seeds. And so this is what came back the next year. But with the golden, there's nothing that came back up, so it's not carrying over in the field for the next year. So one of the really desirable things they've been able to improve. And then also you can see this is really zoomed in. Pennycress seeds are tiny, and so this is really zoomed in, but you can see details of the seeds, the black seed versus the golden seed. So what's the potential for pennycress and really for other cover crops? Well, if we think of the Midwest and think of Midwest agriculture, we grow a summer cash crop, typically corn and soybeans. There are some other things. And then we go into this winter fallow period, and this is what the Midwest looks like from the air, right? With the middle picture here, so it's just bare fields. And we come back the next summer and we plant again. And the picture on the bottom here shows, the dark green area, that shows where all our production agriculture is in the Midwest. So again, there's about 80 million acres here that's for the most part sitting fallow. Cover crops maybe 5-6% of the acres covered here. So what if we rethought this a little bit? We could still have our summer cash crop, be it corn or soybeans, but then we could come back in the fall and plant a winter cash crop. So a little bit different thinking there, right? Something that could generate some income, and then we still come back with our corn or soybeans or whatever in the spring. One of the cool things about pennycress, showing it being harvested here, you can just use the combine that you use for beans in the fall, so you don't need any additional equipment for that. Whoops. All right. So CoverCress has developed CoverCress seed, and they've started the launch. And last fall, it became commercially available to farmers, and about 8,000 acres were planted. There's potential to expand this to millions of acres. The uses, again, are for livestock feed or feedstock for fuel production. And again, it has value as a winter cash crop, and CoverCress is ready for farmers to use. Now, I'm not making any profit off of CoverCress here, but I did bring one of their flyers. If you're interested in this and just want to come take a look at that, I'm happy to share that with you, and we can also direct you to their website. One of the really interesting things about CoverCress is the way the company set up the marketing of this. So, you might be thinking, oh, sounds great, I can grow this crop, but what am I going to do with all this CoverCress seed when I harvest it in the spring? The company's taken care of that for you. So their marketing plan is you set up a contract with the farmer, and then CoverCress has experts that will help you grow the crop. As a farmer, you do what farmers do best. You grow the crop, and then you harvest it, and then you deliver it to CoverCress, and you get a check. So the market's done. You don't have to take it to an elevator. They do that. Remember who purchased CoverCress? Bunge, and Chevron, right? So they've got some of those end users already built in to crush the material, and that it can go as a feedstock into fuel production, and then the meal can be fed to livestock. So that's an interesting twist with pennycress compared to a lot of our other winter cover crops that we look at. There is a market in place. So it kind of brings us back then to this research project that NREC funded with us, and that is, what effect do pennycress and other cover crops have on selected ecosystem services? And so we set up some field studies that were replicated at Illinois State University and Western Illinois University. Just the picture or aerial view of the ISU farm, and we'll come back to that in a second. The cover crop treatments, we've got a winter fallow. So again, we have corn and soybeans in the summer months, rotating through those. And we have a pea, clover, radish, oat mixture. We've got our wild pennycress, and then also the golden pennycress. And then we have a cereal rye plot, and we've grown annual rye as well. So got a picture here of one of our grad students standing out. This is one of the first years we grew this. You can see the cereal rye. The plot next to it is our pea, clover, radish, oat. Radishes are supposed to come up in the fall, right? This is didn't put the date on here. It's probably like June 1st. But this is a weird year. We planted late, the radishes didn't come up, and then in the spring, we didn't have any clover come up, none of the peas came up, the oats died out, and we had a field full of radishes that just looked absolutely beautiful. So this is kind of a cool treatment. You've got 4 different things, and the environment, the weather kind of dictates what comes up. I was also going to make a comment. I was asking my grad student, should I mention this or not? But when you take a picture of your cover crops and you're trying to show how much biomass you produced, I took the shortest grad student in the department out with me to make them look pretty tall. So this is Rashmi. She graduated. She actually had the outstanding thesis at ISU this past year, and she's now down at Texas A&M working on a PhD. So what were our objectives? So we wanted to evaluate the impact of the selected cover crops in a corn-soybean rotation. We were looking at soil nitrogen, phosphorus, and then carbon from soil cores. We're looking at soil pore water, nitrogen, and phosphorus sampled from lysimeters. And then we're looking at corn and soybean yields and also seed quality in central Illinois. So again, this is replicated at Illinois State and also Western. So here's just the real quick overview of our experimental design. So if you've ever been out to the ISU farm, whoops, wrong button there, sorry about that. This is the interstate, I've lost my dot there. This is the interstate down here by the soil cores, those lines there. Here's our buildings, and then we put the research plots there back on the west side of the farm. So we used a block design. We've got 4 replications. I've got some of the agronomy up here. We can go through that if you have any questions. Big thing, we're in no-till. That was important. We grew soybeans. We started these in the fall of 2020. And then soybeans were grown in the summers of 21 and 23, and corn in 22 and 24. We use some synthetic fertilizers when we need to. If there's weeds out there, we spray them, although last year the weeds got ahead of us and my grad students had to go home out. I don't think they were too happy about that. And then I got the soil series up there. One of the things we did that is a little bit different, I want to point out, when we traditionally pull a soil core, you pull the soil core out, you go down 6-8 inches, whatever the lab wants, and homogenize that and send it off. As we think about the impact of especially things like sequestering carbon in soil or these nutrient additions, one of the things we did was we cut that soil core up. So instead of taking, I'll say 15 centimeters, which is about 6 inches, we started cutting those cores up every 2 centimeters down to 10 centimeters, and then we started bulking them a little bit more after that. So we'll really be able to see, are there any increases in like carbon? Are we changing the nitrogen right at the surface? And then we can also look at that in a little more detail rather than homogenizing it. I always would hear, if you switch and start using cover crops, it's going to take years before you'll see an increase in soil properties. And what we found is if you're looking small enough increments, you can find those pretty quickly. So they are happening rather fast. One of my favorite pictures of our team out here, as a professor, when you wait till the ground's as dry as it can be and then say, hey, everybody, you need to go out and pull some soil cores. And, there they are trying to drive those things in the ground. So we're pulling soil cores. You can see from this picture, the corn's up a little bit. This is a few weeks after we planted. That will be important as we talk about the nitrogen. And this, I think, ties back in, Giovanni, with some of your work where you were looking at nitrogen and the mineralization. We're going to see some increased nitrates in the surface of some of these cover crops. Just also, I've got a picture of a soil core, one that we took here, and Keon's got this on his poster as well. But just remember, as that organic matter accumulates in soil, it gives us that dark, rich color up here in this part of the state, but it does decrease with depth. And so again, thinking of those ecosystem services, preventing erosion, keeping that organic matter in place. This is just a picture of the students cutting up the cores, dividing them up into those little increments. And now let's look at some data. So here is looking at soil nitrate levels in the soil. This is just our fallow treatment along with golden pennycress. And so just want to point out a couple things here. Here's our depth. Where's my little marker thing? There we go. Here's our, on the y-axis, our soil depth in centimeters. So we're at the surface up here. So 2 centimeters, 2 to 4, 4 to 6. 2 centimeters, not quite an inch, right? So if that helps work through this. And then we've got the brown is the fallow because, there's nothing on top of the soil. And then golden pennycress, we got this golden color. Look at the nitrates compared in the 0 to 2 centimeters and 2 to 4. And again, this is a couple weeks after planting. When we pulled these cores, there's a little bit of an increase in nitrates there as that biomass is decomposing. Then you get to 4 to 6, really don't see a difference, right? But as you get below that, the nitrate level's decreasing a little bit, perhaps because those roots have been pulling some of that out of the soil. Okay? So again, a shout out. Keon Mackey's got this on his poster. He's got a lot more details than I'm showing here. Let's look at another slide, still nitrate data. We're going to look at 2 different species here. So here I've got pea clover radish oat. I've still got fallow in here as our reference. And notice the pea clover radish oat even more. We've got a couple legumes in here, right? Now, this was a year when the peas and clover actually grew pretty well. We still see it's that top 2 to 4 centimeters. And then we kind of break even here, and then a little bit of reduction as we move down. But cereal rye behaves different. And Giovanni, I think this is kind of something you were pointing at too. Cereal rye is different. If we look at the cereal rye, and I've lost my pointer again, but it actually, at the surface, there's a reduction in the nitrate at the surface. Could be from mineralization. We left all the biomass on the surface. So as that's breaking down, it could be tying up the nitrates in the soil. And as we think about that yield drag, this could be part of the issue there. Okay. So a little bit on nitrates. And then I just want to touch back on biomass. So we let ours grow up a little bit taller than Giovanni, what you were doing. We grew these up till about the middle of May. And so we did have with cereal rye, we're up to about 6 tons of biomass per acre. Now, part of this was to increase the soil organic matter, right? But then you can see pea clover radish oat has a pretty substantial amount, over 5. The annual ryegrass a little behind that. Notice the wild pennycress and CC is CoverCress. We actually had CoverCress seeds out there last year. They're lower. And so you've got less biomass. And so as we look at some of the yield data, we'll see maybe there's an advantage of not having quite as much biomass out there pulling as many nutrients out of the soil or water as well. Moving on to looking at dissolved reactive phosphorus, honestly, we really didn't see much of a difference here. So I think it's just going to take longer term studies to see if we're drawing any of the phosphorus out of the soil. So again, fallows on the top, and then our treatment, in this case, golden pennycress right under it. We do see a decrease with depth. Remember, this is a no-till system, right? And then similarly, looking at phosphorus here in our pea clover radish oat mix, really the bars here, no significant differences in those treatments. And even in cereal rye, we're not seeing a difference in phosphorus here. Okay. So again, this is just like after 2 years. Soil carbon, we're seeing an increase. So again, remember, this is one when people talk about building up the soil organic matter, it's going to take 10 years or so. And I think if you're homogenizing that soil core, it probably takes that long to see it. But if we look at the data here, fallows over on the right, here's our organic matter on the y-axis, and the golden pennycress, pea clover radish oat, and cereal rye, we've seen an increase in about 0.3 to 0.5% organic matter. Well, if you're at 3.3% organic matter and go up 0.3, that's close to a 10% increase in just a couple years. It is increasing. We have not seen any increase in carbon once you get below about 4 centimeters. So stay tuned. We'll keep looking at that. We've also looked at soil pore water. So Mahadi, who's with us today, he's got a poster on this. We put lysimeters in the field. They go down 45 or 90 centimeters, so that's about 1.5 to 3 feet deep. And last spring, they went out and pulled soil pore water out after rainfall events, and we're looking at nitrates and phosphorus. I just want to focus on the nitrate level here. So the red bars are from the ISU farm. The purple ones are from Western. And if we look right up here, especially with the nitrate, this is our fallow plot. There's quite a bit of nitrate in our soil pore water after these rainfall events. But if you have a cover crop out there, any of them, it's really reducing it. Cereal rye, annual rye, golden pennycress, wild pennycress really are dropping. A little more in the pea clover radish oat. Now Western, they started out with a lower number and didn't see as drastic reduction. Western planted their cover crops a lot later than we did, and so they just didn't have the same growth in the fields. And I think that's why we didn't see as much drawdown as those nutrients. Dissolved reactive phosphorus, we saw some reductions here as well, but the trends are not as obvious as with the nitrate. So it does seem like we're pulling those out. The next question is the yield. Everybody's worried about this. Ashley Stockmaster's got a poster on this on soybeans. We just we're analyzing the corn data from last year. So this is from 2023. And we looked at plant populations and then some of the seed quality indicators, oil content and protein. So looking at these real quickly, this is the populations. So kind of a funky graph here to look at. So see if I can get my pointer back here. There we go. It kind of comes and goes. Here's cereal rye. This is the plant populations. Pea clover, radish oat, wild pennycress, golden pennycress, aerial rye, and fallow. There were some significant differences. So again, thinking back to the cover crops that had a lot of biomass production, which cereal rye and pea clover, radish oat, we had a little bit of reduction in plant populations of our soybeans. Didn't notice it as much, especially with the pennycress, 2 pennycress species. But that was the only place we saw significant differences. Now, I think if you're a farmer and look at this, you might think maybe yield's dropping some. This is actually the seed oil content, so still robust oil concentration, so really didn't affect the seed quality much here. When we look at seed protein content, no significant differences in the seed protein content. Yield data, again, they weren't significant, maybe a little bit of a yield drag, but again, you've got, if you're growing the CoverCress, you've got a second cash crop that maybe could help offset some of the soybean loss from that. So just quick summary. CoverCress has been developed from Pennycress. It shows great potential as a winter cash crop. Golden pennycress and the pea clover radish oat mix increased soil nitrates in the top 4 centimeters, but again, they're decreasing below that. Cereal rye reduced the soil nitrate at all depths. Some other quick summaries. Cover crop has not significantly affected soil phosphorus yet. We'll need longer-term studies to continue looking at that. We have seen an increase in soil carbon in the top 4 centimeters, and we'll continue to look and see how it's working its way down in the soils. Cover crops show great potential to reduce nitrates in soil pore water. Cover crops did not affect soybean yield and seed quality, although cereal rye, annual rye, and the mixture pea clover radish oat did decrease our soil populations a little bit. I'd like to invite all of you to a couple field days. So NREC's been helping us sponsor some field days the last few years. We're planning one at Illinois State University, probably late April, sometime along those lines, so look for a call to that. And then Western Illinois, I believe theirs is scheduled for May 22nd. So love to see you at either or both of those. And with that, I'd be happy to try to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rhykerd. We do probably have time for 1 or 2 questions if there are any.
Thank you for the presentation. I had a question about the carbon to nitrogen ratio of pennycress and the wild pennycress when we have that compared to the cereal rye or your mix that has clover in it that would have, a somewhat lower carbon to nitrogen ratio.
Yeah, great question. I'm looking at Bill Perry. Let me see if I can get these numbers right. Pennycress and golden pennycress are going to be almost identical. 25, 26 to 1 is that about right, Bill? Lower than that, a little lower than that. And then, like the clovers, probably, off the top of my head, I guess around 12 to 1, maybe something like that. So, yeah, and then cereal rye is going to be a much wider carbon-nitrogen ratio. Yeah, great question.
Any more questions? Okay, if not, I have a question.
Yeah.
So you are absolutely correct. In your introduction, in my opinion, there's lots of great reasons why a third cash crop, particularly grown over the winter, would be beneficial economically, environmentally, so on and so forth. But 8,000 acres is a pretty darn small fraction of that geography that you outlined. And I realize this is not your area of expertise, but do you know what's the holdup? Is it the grower adoption? Does Bunge have them limited to 8,000 acres? What's holding this from taking off in a bigger way? Do you know?
I'm going to look at Bill as I answer this and see if he cringes. I think it's just a ramping up function of the company ramping up. So, it takes a while to get enough seed to get out to producers. So I think this past year, 8,000 acres was about what CoverCress was targeting to produce. And I think they're looking to continue to expanding that.
Pennycress is less weedy now, but we had problems releasing dual edits in Pennycress, so that was the main holdup. They were ready to go with much larger acreage, but they're not having problems with farmer adoption. It was just problems with regulation.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Appreciate it.